As a kid, all a nigga wanna have was a Burberry scarf and $3 in my pocket. Instead I got beat with a switch, but I don't give a fuck, but it's on my body. Scars all up on me, but I run around from everybody. Life lesson learned, I better learn from this bitch, nobody. She pushed me around, she didn't give no motherfucks about it. She broke my heart 3 times, but I ain't getting...
LSU is going to be kicking off their national title defense at home against Mississippi State. And LSU is coming into the season in this game with something to prove. Because in 2019, a lot of people are trying to throw out the narrative that 2019 was just a perfect storm for LSU. They're not going to ever replicate that success they had in 2019 and 2020. And I don't really think that's quite right. Like, I think a lot of people are really sleeping on LSU this season. Like, look, I understand that 2019, LSU had one of the best teams in college football history. I mean, you had Joe Brady who came in and changed your offense. He was the passing game coordinator for LSU last year. Now he's gone. He's calling plays down there for Matt Rule and the Carolina Panthers. You had Joe Burrow who had the best season for a college football quarterback ever. Now he's gone. He was selected number 1 overall by the Cincinnati Bengals in this past year's NFL draft. You lost a lot of talent on the offensive side of football, including Jamar Chase, who chose to opt out this season. You also lost a lot of talent on the defense side of football to the NFL draft. So, I mean, you lost a lot of talent to the NFL draft. You lost Joe Brady, who is now the offensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers. But despite that, I think that LSU still has a legitimate shot as repeating as national champions. And the reason why is because every program in college football, regardless if you win a national championship or not, has to deal with losing players to the NFL or just losing players in general. Okay, that's college football. It happens. That's why you have recruiting. That's what recruiting is for, to bring in new players to come in and step up and help your team's chances of winning a national championship. You like people at like Alabama after, they won their national championships, didn't get their roster swiped clean from the NFL draft. Okay, people act like Clemson doesn't lose a lot of talented players year in and year out. Same thing with Ohio State. So, I mean, like, I don't really understand this narrative that people are coming in with that LSU isn't going to have a shot at winning the national championship this season because of everything that's happened to the roster, having a lot of new faces. Like, I don't really agree with that. Like, you see, people fear the unknown. Okay, LSU is an unknown commodity. It's going to be a lot of new faces that we don't know how good they're going to be, okay? But let's not act like every team in college football, regardless if they win a national championship or not, doesn't have their roster swiped clean, okay? Everybody has to restart over eventually. That's what recruiting is for. So, I mean, when you look at LSU, the biggest question mark is going to be Miles Brennan. How is Miles Brennan going to perform? And I mean, Miles Brennan, I have a lot of confidence in Miles Brennan. And the reason why is because, look, if this LSU coaching staff and Ed Orgeron didn't believe in Miles Brennan, trust and believe they most likely would have went to the transfer portal and they would have got another quarterback to replace him. And it was a lot of good quarterbacks on the transfer portal market. Okay? So the fact that they didn't go in and bring in another quarterback from the transfer portal shows me that they have enough faith in Miles Brennan that he's the guy who can get the job done. And Miles Brennan doesn't have to be Joe Burrow. A lot of people are trying to say that, JT, Miles Brennan isn't going to be able to replicate the performance that Joe Burrow did in 2019. Like, he doesn't have to do that. Like, if Miles Brennan is just half of what Joe Burrow was in 2019, LSU is going to be in good shape. Also, how's the run game going to look? They're going to have new faces in at running back with Clyde Edwards-Helaire now going. You have Chris Curry, Teron Davis, Price. You got John Emery. So who's going to be the guy who ends up stepping up and being that RB1 for LSU this year? What about the wideouts? The only wideout that we really know about is Terrace Marshall. Justin Jefferson got drafted in this past year's NFL draft in the first round by the Minnesota Vikings, and Jamar Chase opted out. So Terrace Marshall is probably the best wide receiver who they have on the roster as of right now. Also on the defensive side of the football, a lot of new faces, but you still have the best cornerback in college football, and Derek Stingley. So, I mean, LSU, although they did lose a lot, they still have a pretty good team in my opinion. It's just a lot of new faces. Now for Mississippi State on the other hand, they're also coming into this game with something to prove because this is Mississippi State's first game under Mike Leach. And 2020 has been a pretty crappy year for all of us. I think we can all agree. But for me, one of the shining moments of my 2020 was when Mississippi State hired Mike Leach. Because I've always wanted for the last 3 years to see what Mike Leach would do in the SEC. Because I believe that Mike Leach is on par with David Shaw as being the most underrated coach in college football. And a lot of people don't believe that Mike Leach is going to have a lot of success with Mississippi State and the SEC. Given because Mike Leach teams don't really play defense. I don't really understand why people say, to win the SEC, you got to play defense. Okay, in Auburn versus Alabama, I didn't really see a lot of defense played in that game. Only defense I saw was 2 pick sixes from Auburn. And LSU versus Alabama, I didn't really see a lot of defense played in that game neither. I mean, they doggone near put up 100 points. So, I mean, I don't really get the narrative for that. A lot of people keep saying that, they don't play defense or Mike Leach teams don't play defense. Like in college football, I don't know if a lot of you guys know that, but the team that wins the national championship the majority of the time has a top 5 or a top 10 offense, okay? So, I mean, you're not going to win in college football if you don't have a top 10 offense, okay? Look at Georgia. Georgia hasn't really been able to get back to the national championship after they lost to Alabama, but simply for the fact that they just haven't really been able to modify their offense, okay? So now Georgia is now trying to, change the offense to what the rest of these teams are doing in the SEC, and we're going to see how that works out. But, I mean, at the end of the day, Mike Leach, I think, is a really good coach. Like, I don't really buy the fact that people keep saying that, he doesn't play defense. Like, in the SEC, I haven't really saw a lot of defense played in the SEC last year with all the points that was being scored between Alabama and LSU and everybody else. So, I mean, Mike Leach, now in the SEC, when you look at what he was able to do with Texas Tech, he was able to take a Texas Tech program that nobody really knew nothing about and turn them into a respectable program. Then he leaves Texas Tech. We don't hear from him ever again. Goes to Washington State, a school that is pretty much in the middle of nowhere. It's hard to recruit at Texas Tech because not only do you have to do a TCU in Texas, but I mean, you're recruiting everybody else in the Big 12. So you go to Washington State in the Pac-12 with basically in the middle of nowhere, a school that doesn't really have a reputation of being a football school or anything, and he wins there. So despite the fact that people say, he's never won a conference championship game or things like that, like, he's still a pretty doggone good coach, and now he goes to Mississippi State with a talented roster. Okay, like, Mississippi State has a pretty good amount of talent on this roster. Like, they have halfback Kalen Hill, who is pretty much, if not the best halfback, one of the best halfbacks in the SEC entering 2020. He had 1,350 rushing yards, was averaging 5.6 yards per attempt and 10 touchdowns last year in 2019. You also have transfer quarterback from Stanford, KJ Castillo, who KJ Castillo last year was regarded as the best quarterback who was supposed to be drafted number 1 overall in the NFL draft this coming season, or supposed to be a first round pick last year, but it didn't really happen because he had to battle through injuries and he didn't really perform all that well. So now he's going into this game for Mississippi State and Mike Leach in this air raid offense, trying to show everybody that he still has what it takes to be a first round pick in next year's 2021 NFL draft. So, I mean, for Mike Leach, man, like, this is going to be a really big game for him. This is also a really big game for LSU. And, I mean, for LSU, if there was a team who you didn't want to have to play week 1 with everything that's going on this college football off season, it probably would be Mississippi State. Because for LSU, I mean, you don't really know what to expect from Mississippi State's air raid offense. Like, they're going to come on here and they're going to throw the football all over the football field and things like that. But, I mean, how are you going to stop it? You get what I'm saying? Like, with everything that's going on, like, you haven't really had a lot of time to prepare. No spring ball. You pretty much just had like a abbreviated version of spring camp in the fall. Fall camp for SEC schools is what they had, giving teams a couple of weeks to prepare and get everything straight and things like that. But I mean, you still don't really know what to expect from this Mike Leach offense. And I mean, that could cause a little bit of problems. But also, you can say the same thing for Mike Leach. Like, is this air raid offense, are the players going to have everything mastered in time for this game? Because this air raid offense, this is something that, you can just learn to play. But, like, you actually have to go on the field and execute the plays and things like that. And the team that I got to take to win this game, I'm still going to take LSU to win this game. I don't really think anything's going to change. Like, I still think that LSU should win this game because they are the far more superior team talent-wise. But I do think that there is a chance for an upset in this game. And I think there's a better chance of Mississippi State upsetting LSU or winning this game than what a lot of people think. When you look at all the teams that have lost, like, week one, nothing is impossible. So, it is possible that Mississippi State could upset LSU. This is Mike Leach's first game. The SEC hasn't really had a lot of time to prepare for this air raid attack with Mike Leach. So, you don't really know what to expect from it. And plus, it is week one. Teams come out a little bit rusty because we pretty much haven't played the football in like the last 9-8 months. So, people are still going to be trying to get back into the flow of the game and things like that. So, there is a pretty good chance of an upset happening in this game than what a lot of people are giving it credit for. But ultimately, I'm taking LSU to pull out this victory. I think LSU wins this game 42-31 is going to be my final score prediction in this game. And I think that LSU is going to be able to score points like at will because I don't really trust Mississippi State's defense in this game really. But also I don't really trust LSU's defense in this game. So I think there's going to be a lot of high scoring in this game, a lot of touchdowns scored, a lot of points being put up on the scoreboard. The scoreboard is going to be blinking nonstop because they're going to be changing the score. But ultimately I think that LSU is going to come out the victor in this game. And I think they win this game 42-31 is my final score prediction.